Okay. Yeah, it's already 5, but I think we will.
निशांत,
हाँ, बोलिए.
मैं जो बोलूँगा उसका अंग्रेजी कौन करेगा?
मैं कर दूंगा. So I was just saying that yeah, it's already 5, but I guess we can wait for 2-3 more minutes so that more people can join. It's Saturday evening. For some people, it's office timing. For some, it's, I mean, there are other engagements. So anyway, sorry. जो भी लोग हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं सभी का शुक्रिया। आज की सबसे पहले तो मैं ये बता दूं कि आज की बातचीत थोड़ी ज़्यादातर अंग्रेजी में होगी क्योंकि हमारे साथ जो स्पीकर्स जुड़े हैं वो अंग्रेजी में बोलेंगे और अंग्रेजी में ही समझ पाएंगे। लेकिन जो हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं सभी लोग इस चर्चा को समझ सकें, इसमें भागीदारी कर सकें, अपनी बात को रख सकें, तो इसके लिए हिंदी में इंटरप्रिटेशन की सुविधा आज है। और इसके लिए आप चाहें तो लैंग्वेज इंटरप्रिटेशन का एक ऑप्शन है यहाँ पर। आप अगर मोबाइल में देख रहे हैं तो वहाँ पे 3 डॉट्स होंगे। उन 3 डॉट्स पे क्लिक करेंगे तो फिर आपको एक ऑप्शन होगा। और अगर आप लैपटॉप पे देख रहे हैं तो वहाँ पे सामने ही दिख रहा होगा नीचे के पैनल में लैंग्वेज इंटरप्रिटेशन का ऑप्शन, वहाँ पर हिंदी को सेलेक्ट कर लें और चाहें तो ओरिजिनल ऑडियो को म्यूट कर दें। म्यूट ओरिजिनल ऑडियो लिखा होगा वहाँ पर, उसको क्लिक कर दें ताकि जो ओरिजिनल इंग्लिश की वॉइस है वो आपको नहीं सुनाई दे, सिर्फ हिंदी की वॉइस सुनाई दे। हम थोड़ी देर और इंतज़ार करेंगे, 2 या 3 मिनट, फिर हम इस चर्चा को शुरू करेंगे। हमारे साथ जर्मनी से जूडिथ डेलहाइम जुड़े हैं और स्टॉकहोम से क्रिश्चियन टेंगला जुड़े हैं। बाकी साथियों को अपने जान पहचान में आप ये संदेश दे सकते हैं कि मीटिंग चालू हो चुकी है। वो चाहे तो फेसबुक लाइव पर भी जुड़ सकते हैं। उसकी लिंक अभी कल यहाँ पर अभी चैट बॉक्स में डाल देंगे, तो आप उसको भी शेयर कर सकते हैं व्हाट्सएप पे और बाकी जगह पर, और चाहे तो उन्हें जूम पर इनवाइट भी कर सकते हैं। समस्या आती है तो आप प्लीज यहाँ पर जो रेज हैंड का ऑप्शन है उसका इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, या रिएक्शंस में जाकर आप अपना एक इशारा कर सकते हैं कि कुछ है दिक्कत, और या आप चैट बॉक्स में भी लिख सकते हैं कि आपको किसी तरीके की कोई सवाल या परेशानी आ रही है, तो आप वहाँ पर चैट बॉक्स में लिख दें ताकि हम उसको पढ़ के उसका समाधान कुछ कर सकें। अगेन जो स्पीच में हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं लोग, सभी साथियों का शुक्रिया जुड़ने के लिए। हम करीब 2 मिनट में शुरू करते हैं। ये अंतिम 2 मिनट का इंतजार और हम कर लेते हैं, थोड़ी देर से शुरू हो रहा है। शनिवार की शाम थोड़ी मुश्किल होती है सभी के लिए जुड़ना। अभी कल
आवाज आ रही है?
अगर फेसबुक की लिंक इसमें डाल दो।
अच्छा।
हाँ, आ रही। Thanks everyone for joining. Dr. Delheim and Christian, I was just telling all my participants that this session will be, interpretation of the discussion will also be available in Hindi, and how they can listen to that track. And I was just requesting everybody to have a bit more patience because we are going to wait for 2 more minutes. We'll start at 5:10 Indian time. यहाँ पर फेसबुक की लिंक अविकल ने दी है। इसको भी आप शेयर कर सकते हैं व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में और फेसबुक पर, ताकि जो लोग जूम पर हमारे साथ नहीं जुड़ पा रहे हैं वो फेसबुक पर इस चर्चा को देख सकें। ओके, रवि जी क्या लगता है 20 हो गया अभी? एक तो पूरा नंबर हो गया है तो हाँ शुरू कर सकते हैं और लोग जुड़ते रहेंगे। हाँ, तो thanks everyone for joining. We are going to start now. I'll request Rajendra Ravi, who's also director of Institute for Democracy and Sustainability, one of the organizations who's leading the campaign for free, safe and reliable public transport, bus-based public transport in Delhi. And he is also a member of Sustainable Urban Mobility Network of India, SUMNET, which is supporting this campaign. And he will be speaking Hindi. So I will translate that after he finishes for especially for Dr. Delheim and Christian. Yeah, so I request Rajendra Ravi to now welcome everyone who is joining this session, and we can start this session now. Ravi ji.
सभी का स्वागत है आज की मीटिंग में। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं कि रिक्लेम द बस जो हम लोग चला रहे हैं पिछले कई महीनों से, इसका ये 5वां मीटिंग है, जिसमें कि आज हमारे बीच बाहरी देशों के 2 मेहमान हैं। आप सबको मालूम है कि कोविड के दौरान और कोविड से पहले जो पब्लिक बस की जो हालात थी पहले भी अच्छी नहीं थी, लेकिन कोविड के दौरान और भी खराब हो गई और इससे शहर की जिंदगी पे बहुत ही नकारात्मक प्रभाव पड़ा। और हम लोगों ने तय किया कि चूंकि इसका संबंध शहर के लोगों के साथ साथ पर्यावरण के साथ भी है, इसलिए इसके लिए एक अभियान चलाया जाए। इसमें अलग अलग समूहों को हमने पहले से सुनने के लिए बुलाया है और कम्युनिटी से काफ़ी लोग हमारे मीटिंगों में आते रहे हैं, लेकिन इस पे जो कुछ और सवालात हैं कि जो हम लोग फ्री बस सर्विस की मांग कर रहे हैं, उस पे भारत में क्योंकि इसका कोई अनुभव नहीं है, इसलिए बहुत सारे लोगों के मन में यह प्रश्न है कि यह कैसे संभव है। तो हम लोग को जानकारी है कि फ्री बस का मतलब फ्री नहीं होता है, बल्कि दूसरे स्रोतों से जो टैक्स का पैसा आता है वह सरकार इस पे खर्च करती है और लोगों को, कम्यूटर को फ्री बस की सेवाएं देती है, जिससे कि शहर का स्वास्थ्य, शहर में जो मार्जिनल कम्युनिटी के लोग हैं उनकी मोबिलिटी की एक्सेसिबिलिटी बढ़ जाती है। तो इसी को ध्यान में रख करके ये अभियान चल रहा है और यह अभियान एक लार्जर अभियान का हिस्सा है जो सस्टेनेबल अर्बन मोबिलिटी नेटवर्क के माध्यम से चलाया जा रहा है। देश भर में अभियान चल रहा है और महाराष्ट्र के राज्य स्तरीय भी अभियान चल रहा है। हम लोग पिछले कई दशकों से अर्बन ट्रांसपोर्ट को एक कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से देखने और इसको एक नए किस्म से नई अवधारणा में लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं और इसमें हमारे स्थानीय जो समूह हैं, साथी हैं, एक्सपर्ट हैं, इन सबकी मदद के साथ साथ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय अनुभव और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय जो समूह है उनसे भी मदद हमें मिलती है। आज के जो चर्चा है इसमें दो हमारे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मेहमान हैं, जूडिथ डेलहम और क्रिस्टन टेलर। इसके अलावा आज की मीटिंग को मॉडरेट करेंगे निशांत, और इसके साथ साथ जो इंटरप्रेट कर रहे हैं अंग्रेजी से हिंदी में, उसमें मोहिनी और अक्षिता भी शामिल है। तकनीकी रूप से और सोशल मीडिया पे कैंपेन करने के लिए हमारे साथी अविकल भी हैं। हम सबका स्वागत करते हैं और हम अगले कार्रवाई के लिए और हिंदी से अंग्रेजी में अनुवाद के लिए निशांत को आमंत्रित करते
हैं। Okay. Yeah. So thanks, Raviji. Or before proceeding, I just quickly translate the gist of it. So he started with highlighting how the situation has particularly worsened after COVID, especially in Delhi, where people are struggling to get buses on time because of the physical distancing measure that has been put in place, and that's why the number of seats have significantly decreased, and people are finding it difficult to reach to their destination in time. And something about why and what we mean by free and why we are campaigning for a free public transport. So he said that free is not only about it being fare free, but it's important in case of Delhi because it brings accessibility for a lot of people who would otherwise be excluded from using the public service. About the campaign, we are running this campaign for Delhi, but there's also a parallel campaign by the network, which is Sustainable Urban Mobility Network of India. So the network, other members of the network are running similar campaigns in Maharashtra state, and also a national campaign for more buses, which has a very catchy slogan called Lakh Ko Pachas, which is translated as for per lakh population, 0.1 million population, we need 50 buses, at least 50 buses, and so there are three parallel campaigns which are going on. In Delhi's campaign, we have previously invited various experts and scholars and also community organizations to share their views, and we have benefited from their reflections. This session, in the same tradition, has invited two speakers from one from Germany, another from Sweden, and we will hear their views on the international movement of for free public transport, and we will definitely learn a lot from their experiences. Just to add, Avikal here is part of our team. He introduced the team: Akshita, Avikal, Mohini, and others, Arjunji, Anitaji. I can see the names here, so sorry. So other people who have joined, and thanks for their support, thanks for their efforts, voluntary efforts for conducting this session. And we welcome you all. So to proceed further, since I'm going to moderate this session, I would start with this. Sorry, a few people joined late, so I just want to say something in Hindi. जो लोग बाद में जुड़े हैं उनके लिए हिंदी में सुनने की सुविधा भी है। वो अपने पैनल में मोबाइल में देख रहे हैं तो वहाँ पर 3 बिंदु बने होंगे उसको वहां पर जाकर लैंग्वेज इंटरप्रिटेशन के ऑप्शन में हिंदी को सेलेक्ट कर लें और वहां पर आप हिंदी में इस बातचीत को सुन सकते हैं। अक्षिता हमारे साथ है साथी जो इसको हिंदी में इसका अनुवाद करके बोल रहे हैं। अगर आप इंग्लिश में सुनना चाहते हैं तो आपको कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप ओरिजिनल ट्रैक पे सुन सकते हैं। थैंक यू। कोई समस्या होती है आप चैट बॉक्स में लिखिएगा, कोई ना कोई साथी आपकी मदद करेंगे। और अगर आपको कोई बात बोलनी हो तो भी आप चैट बॉक्स में इशारा कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि अभी प्रस्तुतियां होंगी तो उस बीच में अगर माइक को ऑफ रखेंगे तो इट विल बी ये अच्छा काफी अच्छा रहेगा, व्यवधान नहीं पड़ेगा तो हम समय पे बातचीत को पूरा कर पाएंगे। थैंक्स अगेन फॉर ज्वाइनिंग। So to start with what Raviji was also saying, that reclaiming the bus, this campaign is, and we call it a campaign for free, safe, and reliable bus-based public transport. And there's some deep meaning associated with every component of it, which is rooted in the history of the public transport and the whole politics of public transport in Delhi. For example, Delhi also has metro, and it has a good ridership by global standards. About 25 lakh people travel on before the COVID situation came. As compared to that, Delhi also has a bus service which caters to ridership needs of about 40 lakh, more than 4 million people. This is only for Delhi, these numbers I'm quoting. So we have this kind of public transport which has a metro rail, which also has a very developed bus transport system. And apart from that, we also have these feeder paratransit systems, the smaller 3 vehicles, and other such paratransit modes. The new modes coming up, electric rickshaw, used to be cycle rickshaw, and similar modes. So the public transport in India is kind of complex and cannot be defined in simpler ways. But that's why we say we want a public transport system which for Delhi, which is primarily bus-based, because the buses are perhaps most appropriate public transport mode for a region like Delhi, which has highly developed road system. And so, laying over another level of track or railway track to build a metro system, which is costly, which is not affordable for many, and which is coming with a debt finance from international financial institutions. So we demand that this should be a bus-based public transport system. So that's there. And other things free, as we said, that for India, a lot of people, urban poor, cannot access the buses even with such low fares, which is 5 rupees, perhaps for 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers. 5 rupees is very small amount. It's about perhaps 0.2, fraction, 0.2% of a dollar. So it's very low, but still it's unaffordable for, as far as the economic situation in Delhi or in India is generally concerned. So around these issues, we have, and the similar campaigns have been conducted over past 20, 30 years in Delhi, including the campaign for bus rapid transit corridor, which actually operated for around 5-6 years in Delhi, which was later scrapped by the current government, which rules in Delhi, under the pressure of car lobby. So this is also part of the public transport history of Delhi, where we actually put in place a BRT corridor, but it was later scrapped by a government which was elected by the people. Before that, there were mega projects which had been developed, and that sort of created a huge amount of eviction situation. A lot of people, millions of people were evicted because of the transport projects which happened in Delhi over a decade of, early neoliberalization in the 90s and early 2000s. And all of that has created this kind of a situation of urban transport crisis in Delhi, where you have a flyover capital of the world. Every year, we talk about adding 1 or 2 new flyovers to Delhi to solve the traffic crisis. But still, it's also the perhaps the most polluted city in the world in terms of air pollution and all that. And perhaps to take a line from what from the Dr. Dalheim spoke, that some cities are at least experimenting and doing taking steps in the right direction, but most of the cities are not. And perhaps unfortunately, Delhi falls into the latter category. So we started this webinar series also to kind of update our understanding about these issues, both from the experiences of the community people, of commuters, who are the regular users of public transport in Delhi, but also from people who work on these issues, and from multiple angles, from people who work on the housing issues, housing rights, and generally right to the city. They also joined and shared their experiences. So we tried to make it more inclusive in the framework of right to the city. We also kind of understood the experiences that were shared in the previous sessions in our campaign. Many of the everyday commuters who participated and shared their perspectives, especially what is happening after COVID, that the buses are running at less than half capacity. Get the bus on time. Waiting time has enormously increased. Who have only public transport to use, they cannot use any other mode of transport. Their shops, their place of work. They're finding it. Kind of it's killing them in terms of their employment security, that they're on the verge of losing the cater to the demand. And that's primarily because Delhi has about 6,000 buses, whereas what we currently need is at least 15,000 buses. So we have less than half the number of buses that are needed. To serve the current demand, not to forget the demand, because you do not have a good public transport system which everyone could use. So we need more number of buses, but we just did not want to make this campaign only about the number of buses. We also wanted to sort of politicize this idea that what kind of buses, what kind of public transport we want. And that's why the name Reclaiming the Bus, not just the reclaiming the streets, because that's a different idea and a very important idea. But for us, I think we focused on what kind of public transport we want. And that's why reclaiming the bus and reclaiming the public transport. And also that, this reliance on, we always hope that a new government, which is elected by the people, will do something to improve the situation, which never happened. Government after government, we saw that the state did not add the number of buses in the fleet, and it never became safe and accessible for people to travel in buses, and especially for women, children, physically challenged, senior citizens, and other vulnerable users of buses. This became a very, very risky journey to travel on bus. Um, so we said it should be, we should, while we are reclaiming the public transport, we reclaiming is always about reimagining what it could be. And in the reimagination, we, we reimagined the public transport of Delhi to be completely safe, completely accessible, and available at all time, at every place where people want to go, so that this freedom to move, or the right to move, is not denied to everyone or anyone. Um, and in fact, for that, we realized that it should be free, because otherwise it cannot be realized. So I think with that, we are making a full circle today in our webinar series that we started with this kind of discussion in the first session. Then we are coming to a more dedicated session on idea of free public transport and why it makes sense, both politically and economically. And we have, thankfully, we have, very good experts, or very good activist experts to speak on this matter, and I think we will be benefiting from their views today. I'll take just one more minute to set the context further. One thing that kind of struck us was also that the last year was a very significant period in history when we saw some kind of a pan-global rise of popular protests, popular uprisings across the globe. And if I remember correctly, in September, one of the earliest sort of protests were in Chile, when there was a rise in subway or metro fare in Chile, and which was very insignificant if you think about it from a neoliberal logic. It was just 20 pesos, which, if I translate for Indian people, it was less than 2 rupees for us. And suppose that less than 2 rupees have been increased in metro fare or in bus fare, and the whole country, I mean, this triggered the whole country to come on the streets. And it was very popular. By an estimated about 30% people in Chile were on the streets at some time. So this, the fare or the public transport, paying for public transport is a sensitive subject, both politically and as well as economically. And this is kind of central to what we call as neoliberal logic, which is very simply put as, if you can't pay, you will be denied the right to use it. Whereas something, for example, public services, the basic services should be the right for everyone to use. And once you translate, once you deny the right because they can't pay for it, and it becomes common sense to think in this way, then of course, this is what is happening to all of us for quite some time. And there was this protest which where people actually realized that this is completely wrong, and we need to reverse it. And just to set a kind of counter part of it, in Delhi Metro increased its fare by significant amount, almost doubled in some parts, or some distance ranges, it almost doubled. Um, and it happened about 3 years ago in 2017. There was quite a bit of discontent among the users. The state government and the central government had to take cognizance. They said that they will look into it. They showed this kind of put up a show of concern, but nothing happened. And it we kind of adapted to this kind of situation, where we have to think that the government, which we have a welfare state, but the government actually robs the poor, and it pays to the rich, and we kind of buy into that logic. um, so with that, I I think I set the context for the discussion today. And I hope that today, with the two speakers who were very good at it, we will at least in the system at any cost, or perhaps at the people's cost. You have to run the system come what may. So we think we will be able to counter this logic today. Just to welcome our speakers now, after much anticipation, Dr. Judith Delheim. She's a senior research fellow at the Institute for Social Analysis of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. She holds a doctorate in political economy. She's also a member of the European Working Group of Alternative Economists. She co-edited the book, Free Public Transit and Why We Don't Pay to Ride Elevators. And it's Jason Prince was the co-editor of the book. We also have Christian Tengblad. He's a founding member of Planka Nu. Planka Nu is kind of literally translated as fare dodge now. You have to dodge the fare. Planka Nu uses mass civil disobedience to press its demands for cancellation of public transport fare. He's also a chief editor of the book, How We Pass the Barriers, which is based on Planka experiences. So he will be talking about that. But I will first invite Christian to share his experience and the journey of Planka Nu. Before you start, Christian, I request everyone to keep your mic on mute. If anyone has any question, please write that in the chat box. We will take that one by one. And please try to avoid any intervention while the presentations are going on. Okay, Christian, the mic is yours.
Oh, thank you. I'm really delighted to be invited to this seminar, and it's really one issue that's really fun for us in Planka is to help and assist other campaigns around the globe and around our country to see if we can help them do things. And I would say, like, the Planka, some of the Planka experience is extremely specific to a Swedish and Stockholm context, but I think that many of the things we learned through the way might be inspirational or useful to others. So I have a small presentation about this, so I would just share the screen. Yes, so the Planka.nu, it's both an action group of people taking action against public transport fares, but it's also, we're also trying to champion critical perspectives on traffic in general. And I think for us, this has been a good combination, because it means that we're doing some things that borders on civil disobedience, I would say, or at least explores the gray zone of the ticketing and the fare beating system in Stockholm, but also trying to publish books, reports, and like furthering the discussion on public transit. And as you said, the Planka, it's you could say that it means fare dodge. It's actually an older Swedish verb, planka, and it means literally to plank something. And the context was that you have in rural communities, you had venues for dance, and they had like wooden planks around them. So if you plank something, you go across the plank. And now this has been like a general verb for not like skipping a fare or something like it. But it's also one important thing about it is that it's a neutral term. It doesn't have anything. It's not positive, but it's not negative. There are other negative terms to use about fare dodging, like they call it in Swedish, like riding thief or something like this. So we don't use this, but we use the planka. So how did this start? Well, it started with a fare hike. So back in 2001, the Stockholm public transportation, it raised the monthly pass cost by 10%. So it wasn't one of the biggest, but that would equal around $5. And a few young people, and I was involved, we were organized in the Anarcho-Syndicalist Youth Federation, and we we saw ourselves in this situation that we sometimes, some months, couldn't afford the monthly card, and we had we were forced to kind of skip the fares sometimes. And I think like the discussion that started Planka was why should we have this individual weakness of not affording the fare? Could we do something to turn it around and do a collective, make it a collective strength? And that's like the idea of the fare strike. And I want to tell you a few things about what's happened since then. Yes, so about free public transportation. Well, as you can see, this first chart is the burden of fares on the Stockholm public transportation, and it's been steadily increasing. It's been way more than the consumer index, and it has at the same time the level of tax financing of the public transportation also gone down. But you can also see that when the monthly pass was introduced back in the 70s, it was almost the whole decade it lay more or less still. So that meant that it's actually become cheaper each year because of the inflation. So there was a massive idea to have a public transportation available for everyone, but somewhere along the way, along with structural changes and also ideological shift to neoliberalism, you see politicians from the different blocks, not just the conservatives, but also the social democrats, to raise the fares and to steadily get rid of the taxes that have put the prices down before. But on an interesting note, you have the pink statistics, and that means like that's just from 2004, but it's the level of support for the idea of free public transportation in the general Stockholm public. And this latest from this year, that's 49%. That means that this is for all the car users and the public transport users and everyone. So this means like if you should survey just the public transportation users, there will be quite a stable majority for this idea. So I think that for the politician, this has come with a cost to have this politic. That means that people have changed their idea about how public transportation should be financed. So this is some of what happened. And like our main ideas about why we want to do this is probably, some of it is probably similar to what you are thinking, like the just mobility. And it's, I mean, it's simple as the low income riders they earn more from this. And we also have examples from the cities that have introduced free public transportation. Like in Tallinn in Estonia, you had the poorest neighborhood. You could see that their mobility had a sharp rise after the introduction of free public transportation. And in the Belgian city of Hasselt, you see that something like spontaneous visits to hospitals had a big increase. So there are people that are stopped from using the public transportation as much as they would like in this current system. And this is one major improvement with the free public transportation as we see it. Number two of my examples is the climate friendly. And it's, I mean, this is, of course, a big issue around the world with the climate change. And the one thing that's hard about it is that it basically means that people need to stop doing bad stuff. I mean, that's the big thing. You need to stop using fossil fuels in this as much as we do. So it's often kind of a negative policy that you need to stop doing bad things. But I think that free public transportation is a good way into turning this also into an offer that you say that, okay, you can't take the car, you live in a million people city, but you also, now you are allowed to go on a reliable and free public transportation. So it's actually nicer. You don't have to be gridlocked in the traffic jam. You can actually enjoy a book or something else. So I think that's a good Green Deal with the free public transportation. And I would say last and not least for the Stockholm situation is that it's non-violent, because what has happened during these years is that from the classic turnstile, as you see displayed on the right in maybe a outdoor museum of the future, there have been introduced like these automatic doors. You have had a lot more violent crackdowns on people that can't afford the fare, and a lot of the imagination of the public transportation company has been turned toward these repressive measures, like we raise the fare, oh, we have to come think of another way to stop people from beating the fare. So I think this, if we get rid of this, we have less violence, and we can also have focus our energy on improving public transportation. About the Planka main theory of change, we have the fare strike. So our original idea of how to change the public transportation was this: like, if more and more people skip the fare system will collapse. And since it's already part tax finance, the politicians will be forced to increase the tax financing when revenues from fares plummet. Well, now it's almost 20 years later, so we can we can safely say that this hasn't happened yet. Instead, we have become a kind of a permanent fare strike that's always a kind of like lifting this question about the free public transport to the politicians, and kind of making them irritated, or and also trying to build the popular opinion that we need. So we haven't kind of found out our new theory of change, like how are we going to, besides our good arguments, what's the kind of power that we can put behind our ideas to make them happen. But like in this fare strike, there are a couple different components, and there's a few small videos I want to show you as well. And one is like the visibility that before when you had this as like an individual weakness to not afford the fare, then it's also maybe something shameful. But when we wanted to turn it around into a political action, we also wanted it to be very visible, to show people how we did, and to be very open with it, and like creating numerous instruction videos so we can normalize this planking. So this is just a short one. And this is the new kind of glass door that replaced the turnstiles. So you can go the other way, and it's, yes, it's my daughter is also on it. So these kind of videos we did a lot, and I will direct you to more of our ideas, more of our video content later. Another big thing about the fare strike is how to share the risk, because I mean, if we just say that it's something we want to do collectively, that's like the ticket for not paying the fare is still something you have to pay individually. So that's why we developed the P fund. It's an allegory to the unemployment fund that we have, the unions have created. So it's like the Planka fund. And you have to pay like 100 Swedish krona, that's the equivalent of $10 per month, and then you pay the other members if they get caught, and you also are guaranteed to get your fine paid if you get caught. And yeah, I don't define this 1500s like $150, and now the monthly pass is almost $100 or 1,000 Swedish krona. So this is actually the same membership fee that we had in 2001. So this is something in society that has been not been more expensive. And I mean, there's a lot of things you can talk about that, how that, like the economic aspect of it, but I think that will be to go into too much detail, so maybe we can discuss it later. So we have the visibility of the and the proudness of the people planking, and we have the shared risk through the fund, but then we also have like mass actions, and of course we have done like protests and demonstrations and rallies, like the normal things, but one that has one form of action that's been pretty specific for us is the mass planking or the mass evasion. And this is something we saw in the Chilean protests also. So we have one example here from it, and we have done it a few times. So it's like it's the main square in Stockholm, and we have gathered outside to kind of rally the troops and have publicly stated that we want to pass the ticket barriers without paying. And I mean, since we've done this a lot of times, we know something about how the police will react. And this was also in there was a youth festival, so there's a lot of young people joining. And what's happened the latest years is that the police want to get it over with. They want not to have any obstructions to the traffic flow. So that means that all of these ticket barriers were opened by the traffic company and the police. And I think for many of those young people that are participating, they were open for a long time after the demonstration passed. So this was a really good way of feeling that if we come together, we can actually have some power to change things right now, not just in the future. So yeah, this has been a really effective way of making people feel empowered, and also to kind of show the kind of easy way to show how free public transportation would look like. So this about our general strategy. I think like during all these years, we started out doing the focus on just the fares. But gradually we have taken in more perspectives. Like one of the first thing was that, okay, why do we have underfinance? So why did you need to raise the fares while there are billions of kronor available for city highways in Stockholm, which is like a city of the region has 2 or 3 million. So it's impossible for people to, in general, to take their cars to town, but still they try to pour money into it. So we started to think about how traffic in general kind of makes this situation happen. And this was a few blog articles, and it was turned into a book that's called Trafikmaktordningen and the traffic power structure in English. And this is now available in, apart from Swedish, it's English, German, and Brazilian Portuguese. It's actually not released yet, but I wanted to feature their cover because it was so nice. Like they have a lot of people jumping. So I think, and what we want to say in this book is not just like, okay, the cars are on top of the other means of transportation, because that's obvious, but also like we have, we call it automobility, and it's when you have an ideology that says that, okay, we become free by traveling more. And what this actually means is catastrophic for local communities, because it means that local services, even in like suburbs in Stockholm, are shut down, and people are forced to go to the city center. Or rural towns also get their service and jobs and schools are taken away, and they are forced to travel more. So you all the time you increase the forced commuting. Like this is how much you need to commute to sustain a job or a place at a school. And this ideology has not been countered effectively. I mean, in Stockholm, we have good examples of streets in the inner city becoming car-free, or bike lanes widened and these kind of things. But I think it's good, but it's a bit superficial also, because it's not the big issue. And what we would see is the big issue is what would replace the current traffic power structure is something like an accessible society, when we had the jobs were placed nearer to where people live. You had service in your own suburb or your own rural town, and you have much less of the forced commuting, and maybe you could open up for the more spontaneous or joyful use of transport. And of course, also like getting rid of the car from the throne, and pushing for more effective and I mean climate friendly and reliable more forms of transportation. And I think one other thing, because you talked about the situation with the COVID crisis, and I think this is something that in Stockholm the subways and buses have been sustained, but they are threatening now to shut it down, to make it much more crowded because of the lack of fair revenue. And for the leading politicians, they can't really imagine the free public transportation. So it's much easier for them to imagine that, okay, we just slash the bus services. And they even say like, oh, that might be the only alternative if we don't get the government, the central government, to fund us. But this is also, of course, not true, because I mean, they have the richest region in Sweden and a big tax base, so they could really do the free public transportation. So this is something that we also are struggling with, but we have thus far it's been a sustained offer of public transportation, even though there are much fewer riders now. Yes, and I would say, I mean, as you can hear, yeah, there was one thing about the shared risk that I missed that might be very different in different countries, and it's about the legality of it. And in Sweden, like in the 70s, skipping the fare at the same time as, for instance, the parking ticket, it was transformed from offense that the police was involved in into something that a private company issues tickets for. So this means that our actions are not, like in the normal case, it's not illegal, but it's not allowed either. And I think that this like kind of grayscale where we are disobedient to private companies, but not breaking the actual law, that has made us, that's created the gray zone which we could operate in. And I think like our movement or our organization is kind of a small action group, and it's not a mass movement, since we organize people that don't pay fares. So we're always kind of supporting and very happy to hear about like bus unions and broader campaigns, both in Sweden and on other places. And one end note about our videos and instruction material is that it can also be found at the planka.tv. Of course, we have the planka.nu also, but the main language there is English, and the videos are mostly easy to understand even without understanding the written text. So I think this is like the sum up of our experiences, and there are a lot of things to go deeper into. So I will happy to hear about your questions later at the when we have open Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Christian. थोड़ा सा हिंदी के साथ ट्रैक में हम बीच में हम नहीं उतने अच्छे से दे पाए, तो मैं बहुत ही संक्षेप में बता दूं कि जो अभी क्रिश्चियन अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में दिखा रहे थे, उसमें बहुत मोटा जो मोटा एक पॉइंट है वो ये है कि वो उनका सिद्धांत जो है ऑर्गेनाइज करने का यूजर्स को, ट्रांजिट पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट के यूजर्स को, और जैसा कि सिस्टम आपने वहाँ पे देखा जो हमारे यहाँ मेट्रो का सिस्टम जिस तरीके का है, उसी को वो दिखा रहे थे। तो जिसमें आपको एक टिकट दिखाना होता है तो उसके गेट खुलते हैं, तो ये उसी को वो बैरियर कह रहे हैं। और उन्होंने एक किताब लिखी और उसके बारे में जो बता रहे हैं कि सिद्धांत क्या है कि जिसके जरिए लोगों ने एक सामूहिक शक्ति के जरिए इस बैरियर को एक तरीके से तोड़ दिया कि जिस किराया देने के से जो यानी जो भारी किराया देना पड़ता है पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट में चलने के लिए, उसको लोगों ने डायरेक्ट एक्शन के जरिए दिखाया कि उन्होंने उसको बैरियर को तोड़ते हुए एक तरीके से ये रियलाइज किया खुद से ही कि फ्री पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट सिस्टम कैसा हो सकता है, वो उन्होंने खुद से हासिल किया। लेकिन वो एक तरीके का प्रदर्शन था, और इस सामूहिक कार्यवाही ने थोड़ी सी इस एक सामूहिक शक्ति का प्रदर्शन एक तरीके से उसमें किया गया। और उनका जो मुख्य सिद्धांत है वो ये है कि ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग जब इसको अपनाने लगेंगे तो खुद ब खुद जो किराया लेने का जो तंत्र है, जिसमें इस तरीके से मशीन लगाई जाती है जिसमें आप उसके पार नहीं जा सकते बिना किराया दिए हुए, तो ये अपने आप ही विफल हो जाएगा, ये काम नहीं कर पाएगा, क्योंकि सभी लोग बिना किराया दिए और एक साथ जाने लगेंगे। तो इस आइडिया के हिसाब से उन्होंने इसको ऑर्गेनाइज किया था, लेकिन उनका ये कहना है कि ये उस हद तक सफल नहीं हुआ जिस हिसाब से उन्होंने इसको ऑर्गेनाइज करने के शुरुआत में सोचा था, और उतने लोग इसमें मोबिलाइज नहीं हुए। और कुछ और बड़े-बड़े सवालों को उन्होंने उठाया कि जैसे लोकल की बात, लोकल जो इकोनॉमी है उस पे किस तरीके के असर हो सकते हैं जब हम फ्री पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट की बात करते हैं। जैसे उनके शहर में ये हुआ कि अगर आप दूर तक जा सकते हैं बिना किराए के, तो कई बार जो लोकल मोहल्लों की इकोनॉमी है या आसपास के इलाकों की जो अर्थव्यवस्था है, या वहाँ पर जो लोग सामान खरीदते थे या वहाँ जाते थे, उस सब पे काफ़ी असर पड़ता है। और लोग बस से या ट्रांसपोर्ट से अगर दूर तक जा सकते हैं, तो ये सिटी सेंटर को थोड़ा-सा ज़्यादा, यानी जो मेन हमारे दिल्ली में अगर इलाके कहे जाएँ तो राजीव चौक हो गया, इस तरीके से इलाकों में ज़्यादा भीड़ आने लगी थी और सेंट्रलाइज़ होगा, एक तरीके से केंद्रित होने की एक समस्या हो सकती है, अगर हम उसके साथ-साथ और उपाय जो ज़रूरी हैं वो ना उठाएँ तो। ये काफ़ी अच्छा ये बात था, और उन्होंने एक और बात बोली कि शायद ज़रूरत है एक ट्रैफिक पावर स्ट्रक्चर, जिसको वो कह रहे हैं कि यानी ये जो इस तरीके से कौन इसका इस्तेमाल कर सकता है, ये आपकी शक्ति है, आपकी पावर के ऊपर निर्भर है, जिसको हम कई बार इकोनॉमिक सेंस में परचेजिंग पावर भी कहते हैं। तो ये इसके साथ जो रिश्ता है उस पे भी उन्होंने बोला। और ट्रैफिक पावर स्ट्रक्चर की जो किताब है उसमें एक विचार है कि अगर हम ज़्यादा यात्रा करते हैं, ज़्यादा दूर तक जा सकते हैं बिना अपने जेब पर बोझ डाले हुए, तो हम एक तरीके से मुक्त भी होते हैं, आज़ाद भी फ़ील करते हैं। और ये जो विचार है ये एक एक्सेसिबल जो सोसाइटी है जिसमें सभी के लिए सभी जगह पे जाना आसान हो, अफोर्डेबल हो, और जो क्लाइमेट फ्रेंडली भी हो, और एक तरीके से नागरिकता के अधिकार से भी जोड़ता हो सबको, यानी सबका अधिकार के तरीके से सबको लाता हो। तो इस पे उन्होंने ये किताब में भी इस पे बातें लिखी हैं, जिसके बारे में वो बता रहे थे। मेरी उम्मीद है कि कई सारे लोगों को कुछ तकलीफ अगर हो रही हो तो मैं बीच-बीच में भी इसको बताता रहूँगा, जो मुख्य बातें हैं, और हमारे साथ थोड़ा-सा पेशेंस रखिए। और ऑडियो ट्रैक में अभी फिर से हिंदी का अनुवाद शुरू हुआ है, तो उसमें भी आप देखते रहिए। हम इसके बाद एक और ब्रीफ अनुवाद भी देंगे। अब मैं now I request Dr. Delheim to present her views. Just a request, Dr. Delheim, if you can speak a bit slowly, that will help us in interpretation and translations. So just a bit slowly, that's a request. Dr. Delheim. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me to this attractive webinar. I'm sorry for my bad English, what is horrible compared with Christian's one. And I have not so fantastic slides like Christian. And so I hope my talk won't be too boring for you. So, no. Can you see my slides?
Not yet, Dr. Delheim.
You
No.
see the slides?
No, we can't see at this moment.
You can see the slides. Why you can see the slides? We checked it and you could see it,
yeah.
but no.
Yeah.
What is the point? Maybe
try sharing the screen again.
Can you see it now? Hello?
Yeah, well, I can't see.
You can't see.
Yeah.
Why you can't?
Can you, if you have started a screen share, can you stop and just start again? Sometimes this issue comes up.
Yes, I try it. Cannot be. We checked it together.
Yeah.
Now?
No. Judith, do you get to choose when you press this share screen? Can you choose different?
Yeah, Windows.
It lets you choose a few windows, like your web browser or something else. Do you get that screen when you press the share screen?
Okay.
What happens when you press the share screen?
Nothing, you see. But I don't understand this because we checked it together and it worked.
Oh,
yeah,
well, now something's happening.
Finally.
Hey!
Finally, okay,
Yeah.
So what, the presentation? Yes.
These machines, yes.
So I'm sorry for that. I'm impressed by the posts on your fantastic website. And I would like to invite you to look at a Facebook site established by Planka many years ago. Here you might find international news on the issue and also a link to your fantastic website. I try to do my best to keep this Facebook site as fresh as possible. And the second address is also created by Plankanu. It is the most important website where you can find every possible initiative or project for free public transport. And here you will find the links to the websites of initiatives I will stress later. In 2007, some activists from the late Berlin Social Forum like me started the campaign Berlin Goes Free by Tram, Bus, Metro, City Plan. As you can see that I started working on the issue as an activist. And only later in 2011, after getting a job at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, I made the issue of free public transport one of my research subjects. A lot has happened in practice since then, and I will try to present some experiences and conclusions that could be interesting for people in social initiatives and movements. So I would like to present 7 points for the discussion. Let's start with the first one. Free public transport is not a new idea or phenomenon, but in the recent past, the idea has quickly reached new social and political spectrums. Commerce, a suburban municipality on the outskirts of Los Angeles in the United States, introduced free public transport already in 1962, and another West American chapel, Hell, in North Carolina, introduced free public transport in 1974. But both of them didn't keep free public transport. We face 3 phases in the development of free public transport. The first one started in the early 1970s. A growing ecological awareness, high oil prices, left political battles against anti-social, anti-democratic, and anti-ecological policy resulted in demands for free public transport and also in concrete projects for a city for all, in a society for all. This is related to some cities in the United States, in Canada, like Montreal, to some countries in Western Europe, like Italy, France, and Western Germany. A second stage started in the early 1990s, when social and ecological problems have been rising drastically, when cities congested by cars, when traffic jams, loss-making public transport companies, and mobility poverty of growing parts of the population make it clear that things cannot go on like this. So we see a rising number of cities and communities offering free public transport in the 1990s. Often administrations, more or less under the pressure by social movements, have been the main actors. When the global financial crisis broke out, a next stage of free public transport began. The Estonian city Tallinn was the first European capital that introduced free public transport for its citizens. It was in 2013. Since the summer of 2018, in 15 out of 18 districts in Estonia, buses are free of charge. Other cities in Europe, China, Brazil, in New Zealand, Australia, Northern and Southern Africa followed. So there are over 200 cities worldwide that use free public transport in experience with different format. About 100 of them practice free public transport fare for all public kinds of transport within all of their daily operating time. It means in about 100 cities and municipalities you can find a real free public transport. Luxembourg is the first country which introduced a zero tariff in public transport comprehensively. It means at any point in Luxembourg, you can get the bus, the train, everything. You may go without any ticket. So Luxembourg started its experiment in March this year. So, of course, it is worth analyzing experience and concepts of other agencies for developing trans and international cooperation. And we need this cooperation. Everybody from us need it. And while doing so, we could find some interesting things. And so I turn to my second point. Free public transport is not left-wing per se. It means it is not automatically understood as socially just, accessible for everyone, democratic and ecological for all. Free public transport needs not be linked to the idea of the city for all in a society for all and in a world for all. I want to give you two small examples. First, city centers where only the rich live and work, where it is more comfortable for them to shop and have fun without a car. There, of course, free public transport is very anti-democratic. Or a second example, you can find cities to which many people have to travel by car because they work there but cannot live there and cannot use any affordable regional public transport. So we get the third point. A left-wing approach to free public transport has to start with an analysis of the living conditions of socially different people and to become an integrated and integrating approach. It means free public transport cannot be any final or isolated aim, but only a tool to organize people, to improve living conditions, first of all, of the socially weakest, of the poorest. A left-wing approach to free public transport orients on the participation in political decisions, on protection against physical and mental injury, on healthy eating, meaningful work, housing, education, medical care, child and elderly care, reasonable mobility and leisure time, and all of this in a healthy environment. And this, of course, is another society. In consequence, we speak about free public transport in cities and municipalities for all, in countries for all, and so about completely transformed cities, municipalities, societies. But we start with the seemingly elementary fact that for many people, the first step to a better life begins with getting to school, work, the doctor, relatives, old and new friends. And also political participation depends on mobility and so on the access to a bus or another kind of public transport. Children should not have the choose between foot or walking hours to school or no foot and going by overcrowded buses in case the bus system does work. So a left-wing approach to free public transport demands conceptions and above all social and political movements to change the societal structures to overcome poverty, social exclusion, social divisions, and social inequality. So the speech is about social movements which become able to change the production structures. When you look at the existing production structures in the global industrial regions, you see that 6 economic spheres serve as basis of societal control: energy, transport, agriculture, agribusiness, of course, not so small person mentioned here. You see the defense or the security industry, finance, and high tech. And these 6 economic spheres penetrate each other, and they are responsible for the largest consumption of land surface and natural resources, for the highest levels of pollution, and simultaneously for the highest profits. Globally, energy-related activities produce around 63% of climate-damaging emissions, including 77% of carbon dioxide emitted. The transport sector depends on oil, and oil is responsible for over 95% of transport carbon dioxide emissions. The beginning of destruction and reconstruction of these 6 economic spheres is a precondition for essentially changing the socially and ecological destructive consumption structures in the global industrial region, where, for example, an average German citizen consumes about 3 times as much as he or she should consume in the interest of the global population. 35% of her or his ecological footprints relates to nutrition, 25% to housing, 23% to mobility, and 18% to consumption during leisure time. But an average feature levels out poverty and wealth. So the top 10% of the global income spectrum consume 20 times as much final energy as the lower 10% of population. The top 10% consume 187 times as much fuel and power like the lower 10%. But let's us be realists. What is my 5th point? A left-wing approach to mobility and so to free public transport cannot mean that every small initiative for free public transport has to deal with all of the explained connections at the same time. Such a demand would defeat any initiative for free public transport. However, the above is intended to show that an initiative for free public transport will only get free public transport when many other emancipative and solidarity actors are active in the city, in the municipality, in society. A left-wing approach to free public transport has to orient on building alliances, becoming able to change the social, societal, production and consumption structures I showed you. So every leftist must be pleased when an emancipative solidarity initiative for free public transport is being created, and he or she should support it. This does not mean that every active left-wing activist must participate in this initiative. But for example, a leftist member of a steel workers union has explained to the steel workers why he is in favor of free public transport, and he can campaign for free public transport. And this is my sixth and my biggest point. So, however, the considerations I told you also explain the phenomenon that long-term and sustainably working actors through a zero tariff in public transport or for free public transport are either primarily or essentially alliances of different organizations. And thus the demand for free public transport unites them. This is true, for example, of Free Transit Toronto. Or sustainably working actors for free public transport cooperate with stronger organizations such as political parties, trade unions, associations, networks of critical journalists. This is true, for example, of local initiatives in some cities in Germany, where local and regional associations of the left party have made free public transport a priority. But there are also, or above all, some mass movements like the great Brazilian movement Zero Tariff, where people from very diverse social backgrounds meet each other and work together. A lot of left-wing activists participate in Zero Tariff, but they are also members of other social movements or political organizations, networks, and so on. But there are also cases where parties like the Scottish Socialist Party, the Left Party in Germany, the Centre Party in Estonia, the New Democrats in Canada, or the Polish Workers' Party have taken up the demand for free public transport. Or strong associations like the Friends of Nature in Germany have picked up the demand for free public transport. Of particular interest is the experience of the already mentioned Free Public Transport Toronto, where a local alliance has created a regional movement for free public transport, what influenced the left in rural Canada. So another very interesting example of how the demand for free public transport originally articulated by one small group of activists was taken up by other actors is the movement City for All, or Right to the City. Nishant mentioned this already. In many cases, groups for free public transport joined networks like City for All, Right to the City, or Solidarity Cities. And often initiatives for free public transport became founders of such networks, or were among the founders of such networks. So I turn to my seventh point. This is very short. When you look at the experience, you can see a very interesting fact that initiatives and movements for free public transport are particularly creative, particularly humorous, particularly cooperative, and particularly internationally networking. The Plancker Nu is a reflection of all that good features. So I would like to finish with the call let us be particularly creative, particularly humorous, particularly cooperative, and particularly internationally networking. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Delheim. That was very sort of illuminating, and it was thought-provoking also. And just to add to that, we have been thinking along the similar lines. We have been organizing along the similar lines or principles, as you mentioned, which you call as left-wing approach to free public transport, or to realize this free public transport. We definitely do not think of it just as an issue or just as an issue of affordability, but as a part of the wider need to create a movement within the framework of right to the city or similar such framework. Just to know if there is any question from anyone. I think I haven't missed anything, but I didn't see any questions in the chat box. So we have finished the presentations. Both of our speakers have presented their views. Now, anyone, if you want to write anything in the chat box, or if you want to ask questions, you can also raise your hand and ask the questions by unmuting yourself. अगर आप में से जिन लोगों ने प्रस्तुतियों को ध्यान से सुना, आप में से कोई लोग कोई सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं, अपनी बात को रखना चाहते हैं, हमारे स्पीकर्स की बात को सुनते हुए उसमें कुछ जोड़ना चाहते हैं, तो प्लीज या तो चैट बॉक्स में लिखें, और या आप यहाँ पर अपना माइक को अनम्यूट करके भी बोल सकते हैं। आप हिंदी में बोलें या अंग्रेजी में बोलें, किसी में भी बोल सकते हैं। मैं कोशिश करूंगा, अगर आप हिंदी में बोलेंगे तो मैं उसको इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट भी कर दूंगा। जैसा भी आप चाहें, आप यहाँ पर अपनी बात रख सकते हैं। एक सवाल अभी रवि जी ने पूछा है। So there's a question I think both of you can answer, because both of you perhaps would know about it. How much participation do you think has come from Green Party in Europe in this movement, or do you see the role of these kind of new sorry सुनीता जी, मैं आपके पास आता हूँ। ये एक सवाल मेरे पास। What kind of role do you see, if I just broaden this question, what kind of role do you see of political groups in Europe? Perhaps then we can perhaps relate with it in Indian context, of parties such as Green Party and likes. And perhaps, yeah, Christian, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I think we have had there are some it's kind of spread throughout the political spectrum, especially in smaller municipalities, and we have municipalities in Sweden that have introduced this, and it's not it's different political majorities, but I think as for the ideological bit of it, then the parties that have forwarded this idea the most is the left-wing party. It's the former communist party. It's the third biggest party in Sweden. So they have been, and their youth federation have also campaigned about this a lot. And I think also we also have a feminist party. It's not in parliament nationally, but it's in some municipalities, and they have also adopted a lot of these things. The thing about the Green Party in Sweden is that I think they have they were really started by the civil disobedience activists and such in the 80s, but they have made a remarkable voyage on being institutionalized. And they are actually a big opponent of the free public transportation now, both in their politics, because they are running together with the right wing, the Stockholm region. So they're actually raising the burden of fares here, but also they also are opponent ideologically, because they think that people should bike more, which is, I mean, it's not bad to have a good bicycle infrastructure, but the way we see it, it's something that is combined with the public transportation, and they are not the opponents. That's the thing about mass motorism, that cars push out all the other modes of transport, but the other modes of transport, they are often coexisting. Like you take the bike to the commuter train, or you bring the bike on another train, and you walk to your subway, and they always combine. But so I think the Green Party in Sweden, which is really on a decline, they are not an interesting figure in this movement right now.
Okay, that was interesting to know. Dr. Delheim, do you have any comments on this?
A small addition, because I worked at Avesta and some other small cities around Avesta. Avesta is a small city in Sweden. Here, a coalition of the left parties, the Social Democrats, and the Greens introduced free public transport. And the interesting thing is that the reason for introducing free public transport is that it was the best way and also the most economic way to resolve the transportation system. Yeah, so see, it is not many people cry, and of course the neoliberals cry. They say it is too expensive, our budget constraints are the huge. But when you look at all the different costs you have to cover, then you see that there are possibilities that free public transport is cheaper than another resolution, like building new streets, for instance. And the other interesting thing is, after Avesta introduced free public transport, two small cities close to Avesta realized the best resolution would be when they together create a regional public transport system. So they enlarged it because it was better and cheaper and socially and ecologically more just to join forces to introduce free public transport and to reduce the car transport and so on. It's really interesting. Of course, it is a special case because the Swedish constitution and the Swedish administration is a very special one. When you look at the law and the tax system and the finance systems in other countries, you have not such comfortable conditions for introducing free public transport like there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think one thing that we can perhaps, I mean, that was an interesting thing to know about, that how particular political factions or parties or forces have been using, you know, a bicycle as an isolated instrument of, you know, this kind of environmental politics at the and completely ignoring how it should be perhaps integrated with the wider demand for public transport, and of course the right to city, as Dr. Delheim was also speaking. And I think not many, but at least a certain section in India is also sometimes doesn't realize this connection and pushes for certain solutions which are not in that sense proper, or don't promote proper democracy on the streets. And also, perhaps I will take other questions, otherwise I will speak. There's another question by Raviji, who is asking, what is the impact of public transport during and now when we are, okay, perhaps before, how much is the impact of pandemic on public transport, maybe? Yeah. Christian, Jules.
Yeah, could you restate the question? Yes.
What is the impact of COVID on, pandemic on public transport?
So I think I mentioned it a bit, but there has been a big popular demand to keep all the service running and to run as many trains and as many buses as possible because of not doing congestion in the public transportation. So this is happening, but at the same time, a lot of less people are traveling, so they are losing their fare revenues, and also on the buses, people usually validate their ticket at the drivers. They enter the bus in the front and then they validate the ticket. But now this is closed off because of to protect the drivers. So that means that they also lose some ticket income from this. So I think the big question here is if we and others are successful in talking about how the free public transportation is actually something that would make the financing of the public transportation more reliable when you can't depend on the fare revenue. It's been going well, but I think that a lot of public transportation companies are soon going to have no more cash reserves. So there needs to come some solution. I think we have a really good chance of impacting that by stating our claims for the free public transportation that would save public transportation from cuts.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Denham, you want to add?
Yeah, the reality is very contradictory. On the one hand, we also face big losses of the companies in free public transport because the numbers of the passengers are declining and so on. On the other hand, we face some interesting new experiences, like in the United Kingdom, buses became free for the people working in the health system, and also in other cities in the world. Free public transport was introduced not forever, but only for a small time because of the fact that on the one hand, the companies get money from the budget for serving. On the other hand, of course, they depend on the tickets. So, but when the people don't use public transport, then of course the losses would become terribly in case the bus system or the public transport system would stop working. So for them, it is better to make loss, but to get the money from the budget and to offer free public transport. On the other hand, we have also a new discussion about the whole system, about the commons, not only discussions on the public transportation, but also on the healthcare system, on the organization of the public life in the countries, in the cities, in the municipalities, in the countries, because the COVID-19 shows also the neoliberals that we need something new, that the existing system doesn't work. It doesn't mean that they could be convinced to do the reasonable things, but a chance emerged, a possibility to act. So, and now, of course, the question is the left strong enough to use this window of opportunity, or it isn't? On the one hand, I'm skeptical. On the other hand, I'm a little bit optimistic, because much more people than the left realized that changes are necessary.
Yeah, that's quite a pertinent point. I mean, and it kind of adds to our, I mean, it's not just limited to the situation of public transport, whether it be in India or anywhere. It's probably about what kind of world we are, entering into. Sorry, I heard Sunita ji was about to. Sunita ji, आप कुछ बोलने वाले थे तो आप.
हमारे
सॉरी, इको है, थोड़ा बचाइएगा. हाँ, बोलिए.
की महिलाएं हैं जो अपनी बात रखना चाहती हैं. बताइए लूसी. नमस्ते. नमस्ते. मैं हेलो, सबको सुनाई दे रहा है?
बोलिए बोलिए. हाँ
हाँ जी. मैं बुराड़ी संत.
आवाज चली गई है सुनीता जी, आवाज चली गई है. सॉरी, आवाज नहीं.
हेलो, जोर से. हेलो,
आवाज नहीं. हाँ, अब आ रही है. बोलिए बोलिए.
के दौरान हमारे यहाँ बस में 20 से 21 लोग को लेते हैं, तो क्या विदेश में भी ऐसा ही होता है?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, she's asking whether the situation in the public transport same, in other countries, in your countries, when, I mean, in India, we are running at less than half capacity, only 17 people are traveling at a time. Is that the same situation there? Christian and Dr. Delhem, both of you can answer. Sorry, you are on mute, Dr. Delhem.
Yeah, sorry, it was extremely terrible to hear. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so we have a participant from who's joining us. She's a domestic worker, and she is asking a question that we are facing a difficulty because of the limited, sitting capacity in the buses because of the COVID. Is the situation same there in other countries also, in your countries also? Because here we are facing enormous difficulty because of that. So it would be good if we know about other countries, and whether this is the similar problem. This is problem faced by people in other parts of the world also.
We also face this problem, and that's why we have the discussion about introducing new buses and new kinds of public transport to extend the S-Bahn, especially the tram. The tram is the best way to enlarge the public transport system quickly. So, and it is a common experience of cities and municipalities which introduced free public transport, that before they did this, they have enlarged the public transport systems. It means they made investments. So, and the COVID-19 pandemic shows that we need another public transport system to double or to extend the capacities and to reduce the occupied seats, because this pandemic won't be the last one. We will face new pandemics, and the challenge will remain.
Okay, I'll translate this first and then I'll ask Christian to speak. डॉक्टर डेलहेम का कहना है कि सिचुएशन उसी तरीके से काफ़ी परेशानी भरी थी उनके देश में भी, और वहाँ पर भी इसी तरीके की दिक्कतों का सामना करना पड़ रहा है। उनका ये भी कहना है कि मतलब बसों को या पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट की जो कैपेसिटी है उसको बढ़ाना होगा, यही एक मात्र तरीका है, और ये मतलब ये काफ़ी समय से बढ़ाया जाना चाहिए था जैसे हमारे देश में भी, लेकिन ये नहीं किया गया। और अब तो निश्चित तौर से अब ठोस कदम उठाने चाहिए कि कैपेसिटी बढ़े, ज़्यादा बसें आएँ फॉर एग्जांपल हमारे यहाँ, और ये सोच के करना चाहिए कि ये अकेला पैंडेमिक नहीं है, ये अकेली महामारी नहीं आई है। जिस तरीके की दुनिया हमने बनाई है उसमें अभी और बहुत सारी इस तरीके की महामारियों का सैलाब हमारा इंतज़ार कर रहा है, तो उस हिसाब से भी हमें तैयारियां करनी चाहिए और पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट को दुरुस्त करना चाहिए। अब मैं क्रिश्चियन से पूछता हूँ इसी बात का जवाब। क्रिश्चियन प्लीज।
Yeah, I think mostly like how I already described it, that I think that up until now public transport has been running full capacity, even that there are fewer passengers. But now when the reserves of these regional governments and public transportation companies are fading out, then we need to, the real fight will begin if public transport will be cut down and made something like the same kind of situation, that you have a crowded and a few crowded rides, or if we take a step towards the public financing of free public transport and can have less people traveling, even though we have a big variety of services available, so that there won't be congested. Because I think also it's easier thing also in Stockholm, because in the normal level when a train is full, it's not that full that it might be in other countries and cities in the world. So I think we are coming up to this big fight about how to move transport into 2021. Like, okay, how would it look like? Because a lot of restrictions will of course still be there. So we're not sure yet of how it will unfold.
Yeah. सुनीता जी और सभी साथी जिन्होंने सवाल पूछा था, क्रिश्चियन कह रहे हैं कि मतलब एक बड़ा अंतर है हमारे देश और उनके देश में कि जैसे सामान्य दिनों में वहाँ पर जो ट्रेनें हैं, बसें हैं, वो काफ़ी खाली चलती हैं। हमारे यहाँ की तरह उतना दबाव नहीं है पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट पे जितना हमारे यहाँ है। एक तो वो बात है, और लेकिन दूसरी बात ये भी है कि जो क्राइसिस आई है उसमें तो इसी तरीके की स्थितियाँ रहीं वहाँ पर भी। कुछ समय के लिए पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट बंद भी हुआ, जिससे बहुत सारे लोगों को समस्या हुई। और वो वाइडर एक बड़ी बात बोल रहे हैं कि एक ज़रूरी बात ये है कि कैसे पब्लिक फाइनेंसिंग के महत्व को बढ़ाया जाए। बसों को पब्लिक फाइनेंस करना होगा, यानी मतलब ये जनता का पैसा पब्लिक बसों को बढ़ाने में लगे, फ्लाईओवर और वगैरह नहीं बने, इस तरीके की बात की तरफ वो जोड़ते रहे थे। और कोई सवाल हैं साथियों के तो आप पूछिए। एक आकिस का सवाल है। आकिस ने पूछा है कि पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट अभियान जो भारत में ऐसे भी वेलफेयरिज्म की पॉलिसी से हमारी सरकारें हटती जा रही है, वेलफेयर की तरफ नहीं सोच रही हैं, तो वैसे समय में ये कितना संगत लगता है कि हम फ्री पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट के कैंपेन को एक डेवलपिंग देश जैसे भारत में कैसे देखते हैं उसको, जबकि सरकारें बहुत ही खुले तौर पर अपने आप को वेलफेयर यानी जो जनता के प्रति उनकी जिम्मेदारियां हैं उससे वो हटते जा रहे हैं. So you read the question which Akis Farooq has asked Christian and Delheim. Yeah, so Dr. Delheim, if you can respond first and then Christian.
Yes, it is an interesting question, and I would like to say that free public transport is not only an invention of people and movements in rich countries. When you look at Marika, Christian, and me, we're together there. It is a city in Brazil. You can see that they realized a fantastic model of free public transport, and they show that they want to change the whole city, and also in small municipalities in the Kurdish areas in close to Rojava, and also in Turkey. They realized free public transport. The question is, do the people want, or the authorities want, to repeat the Western way and do all the stupidities and crimes what the Western forces did, or do they want to go another way, a better way? So that's why I think that the experiences in the developing world are extremely interesting, but it is not so easy to find them. I heard about initiatives in Kenya and also in other African countries, but I couldn't get any contact to them. But I think, especially, but also and especially developing countries can go another way, and to introduce free public transport instead of building up roads and highways and so on. But of course, it's the question about the political will, and so the political power balance.
Christian, if you can.
Yeah, I think I also echo a lot of the things Judith said, that the main lesson from how to build a traffic system that comes from, for example, European countries is that you shouldn't follow it. And that there's so many billions that have been thrown down in like a black hole of mass motorism, especially in the bigger cities, because it's not just road costs for building the city highways, but it's also like the congestion that just eats up thousands of hours of time for people. It's huge parking lots that just seal off whole districts of the city from human life, and it's just a very destructive policy that has been followed. And it's also, as Judith said, it's been because we have some really big interests, like the Swedish car industry, for instance. In the other countries, the fossil fuel companies have been really responsible for doing this, even though it's been non-effective, climate destructive, and just not friendly to humans. So I think like the same amount of, if you just have the same pot of money, then you have to have like the big idea of using it for the common people, and to making a transport system that really serves everyone, and that's reliable, and also not like this mass motorist society that kind of fails every rush hour, like at least once in the morning and once in the evening, then everything just stands still. And if there's a crash or something, then it's just chaos. And this is this is by design, and it's everyone that has the opportunity to do things differently should immediately grab it.
Yeah. Thanks. I think there was quite a bit. There's another comment by Neetu ji. She's from Urban Women Workers Union. She is saying that it should be free. The buses should be free for women and senior citizens, and there should be separate buses for women, so that the driver will stop the bus on the bus stop, and women will also feel safe. I think the situation after COVID is that, and there is this view that the drivers are not stopping the bus at the bus stop, especially when they see that only women are standing on the bus stop. And there is this kind of situation reported from some places. So in that view, I think this is point which is, I think, on the ground, women are feeling that this should be the case. This will be an important thing to improve the bus system in the city. And I think, yes, if there is separate bus for women, then it will be, of course, it will be compulsory to stop at the bus stop because it's for the women. Perhaps there's this logic. There's another comment that transport ministers do not, then have they travel in the buses and they only want votes from the people and citizens. So yeah, so there's this kind of general observation on the democracy and what does it actually mean. And I think on this, all of us would agree that substantially, in terms of substance, I mean, the democracy that we have, it's not a substantial democracy. It's only in terms of very symbolic electoral democracy that we have. Is there any comment, question that anybody would like to speak or write? I have a couple of things. Meanwhile, if somebody has anything else to add, please do. किसी के पास और कुछ कहने हैं तो आप लोग जोड़ते रहिएगा. हमारे पास करीब हमने 10 मिनट देर से शुरू किया था, तो हमारे पास 10 मिनट हैं अगर हम एक्सटेंड करना चाहें. We have 10 more minutes perhaps, because we started 10 minutes late. If you both agree, Dr. Delheim and Christian. So yeah, so if आप लोग को कोई सवाल जोड़ना है तो आप जोड़ सकते हैं. One thing I wanted to get your view on was that, there's this question when you discuss free public transport with anybody. There's this question that will this not be misused? And something similar to that, Christian was also highlighting when, the big question that he was saying that, people, if the travel is free, then people can freely travel to whatever distances. Then there's this other side of it that, it could be used as an instrument to push people to travel longer, and perhaps it'd be harmful from, the right to city or the kind of control over the city kind of point of view. So I think I have also discussed in circles, and even in closer network of advocates of sustainable mobility and sustainability in general. There is this kind of a skepticism with the idea of free public transport, and much of it has to do with whether it is useful, whether it would be misused, and for me, it's like it's very much governed by this neoliberal logic that it always puts onus on the people to behave and there's always a skepticism with how people behave rather than how governments would behave. But I would like to get your view on this question, because I think you would also have come across this question quite frequently. Yeah, Christian, you can.
Yes, so I think, I mean, it's a fair point that free public transport is one measure, and it's in a context, and you need also to look at this with forced commuting, as I mentioned before, and also, I mean, there are other things like infrastructure for other modes of transportation, but I think a lot of the skepticism on free public transport has not been revealed in the data from the countries and cities that have tried it. Like we heard a lot in Sweden that, oh, it's only people using bike that will shift from the bike to the bus, but this has not been the case in our when we review the data. And I think this is something about public transportation or transport in general is that mostly people have to go to their job or to their school and back home. And more than that, we also have, of course, things that you do voluntarily and spontaneous, but the main travel in our society is these kind of forced components. So the idea that people would, that sometimes people bring up, that people would just sit and go back and forth on the bus line or the tram line just because it's free, it's just simply something that's not grounded in reality. Then you would also have the people having the monthly pass. They would also just go back and forth because they already pay for it, so they can travel as much. But most people don't view the public transportation as a roller coaster or something like amusement park, but something that you have to do in order to get to meet friends or go to work or something like this. So I think we should be patient and answer these questions from critics, but often we have the answer also in the data from our experience of public transportation in cities and countries.
Yeah, quite apt. Yeah, Dr. Delheim, you want to add?
I want to support what Christian said and add 2 small points. I think Christian also explained why it is necessary to prepare the introduction of free public transport. You cannot announce from that date public transport will be free. You must make this matter a public matter, a democratic matter, a matter of culture, and to show that we need different things to improve the living conditions in the city. And the second is, when you look at statistics, I would like to come back to Avesta. After the introduction of free public transport in Avesta, the number of the pedestrians increased because for the people it became much more comfortable to go to work and to other places without being pressed to deal with cars. So they preferred walking. It's much more comfortable now after a high number of cars decreased.
Yeah, and I think so. I think हिंदी में हो भी रहा है, but फिर भी मैं हिंदी में बोल दूं. मैंने पूछा था कि कई बार लोगों को ये सवाल होता है कि अगर हम फ्री कर देंगे तो काफी सारे लोग गलत इस्तेमाल करेंगे, क्यों मतलब बेजा जो है वो चलने लगेंगे, उस पे बसों में चलने लगेंगे जो जरूरत नहीं है. तो ये सवाल काफी फ्रिक्वेंटली आता है, काफी बार आता है. तो इस पे उन लोगों को जब बात हुआ तो उन लोगों ने क्या जवाब दिया या उनको क्या इस पे लगता है. तो ये काफी जरूरी बात है कि जितने मतलब पहली बात तो हमें इसको सोचना चाहिए, इसका जवाब शांति से देना चाहिए जब भी कोई सवाल पूछे. लेकिन ये बात समझनी चाहिए कि भाई जो इतना सारा जिस तरीके का तंत्र हमारा ट्रांसपोर्ट का बना हुआ है, उसके उसमें जिस तरीके से कार और मोटर गाड़ियों का एक तरीके से वर्चस्व है, उसके बीच में मतलब वो तो अननेसेसरी ट्रैवल उस पर सवाल नहीं किया जाता है इस तरीके से। जबकि पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट जब इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो ज़्यादातर लोग, हम लोग इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो देखते हैं कि जो लोग काम से चाहते हैं, ज़रूरत के हिसाब से ही पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट का इस्तेमाल किया जाता है। ज़रूरत में हमारा घूमना फिरना भी शामिल है। सिर्फ आदमी सर्कस में घूमने जैसे जाता है, सिर्फ उसके लिए बसों का आनंद लेंगे, ऐसा नहीं होता है ज़्यादातर। बहुत ही, अगर होता भी है तो बहुत कम होता है। तो ये चीज़ को हमें पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस के हिसाब से सोचना चाहिए कि क्या ऐसा होगा। और मेरे ख्याल से एक और चीज़ उसमें जोड़नी चाहिए, जस्ट टू ऐड अनदर थिंग, Dr. Delham and question that I think the thing about the responsibility or the accountability is always on the people, and there's always this sense of misuse of. We need to also question perhaps misuse of what, and what is being misused. And if we think that public transport is a commons in a sense, it's our collective, it's collectively owned, then it's also possible to use it in whatever way one wants to. Of course, not to restrict the users, for example, not to deteriorate it in certain ways and all that, but one can use it to in whatever way one wants, so that they can get um, pleasure and good life and good well-being out of it. And also related to that is, for example, in India, we are seeing this kind of massive infrastructure and expenditure on it. For example, we have these projects which are, very expensive projects. Some of them are Central Vista in Delhi, for example. Bullet train, multiple bullet train projects are coming up. And their rapid rail and all these intercity travel which is happening, which is perhaps not even required at this moment, and perhaps not even good from sustainability point of view. And governments are doing that. They're bulldozing public opinion over whatever for whatever thing they want to do, and there's no accountability, and there's no angle of misuse there. But when it comes to ordinary people using public transport to travel to whatever place they want to, it is counted as misuse. So I think there's this logic that should be centrally countered. If there is any other question, we have other people also in the meeting and who have patiently listened to all these points. I would be very happy अगर आप लोग भी जो इतनी देर तक हमारे साथ जुड़े रहे, प्लीज कुछ बातें अगर रखना चाहें. We are reaching the time अभी, समय खत्म होने पे है. तो अगर क्विकली अगर कोई बोलना चाहे तो बोलें, वरना I will ask Ravi ji to formally thank and end this session. रवि जी, आई गेस कोई नहीं बोल रहे हैं तो हम इसको कंक्लूड करते हैं.
धन्यवाद आप सभी को, खास करके हमारे जो दोनों वक्ता बाहर से जुड़े उनका काफ़ी अच्छा डिस्कशन हुआ और काफ़ी अच्छी जानकारी भी मिली, जो हम अपने आगे कैंपेन में इसको शामिल करने की कोशिश करेंगे. हम लोग ये भी कोशिश करेंगे कि इस तरह के जो सॉलिडिटी है, जानकारी है, वो लगातार बना रहे और एक दूसरे से एक्सचेंज लेते रहें. तो अब आज की जो मीटिंग है वो यहीं पे ख़त्म की जाएगी. ख़त्म करने से पहले, चूँकि मैं हिंदी में बोला हूँ, तो इसका अनुवाद करके इनको बता दिया जाए और फिर उसको ख़त्म किया जाए.
Okay, just to translate it in English for Dr. Delham and Tengler, we really thank you, of course, for taking some time out and joining us for this session, showing your support to this campaign, and sharing your insights and very, very important points on free public transport and the idea and the politics. I think we will try to continue building these solidarities moreover, and with more people who are part of this campaign for free public transport around the world. And we would seek your help in doing that. If there is any collective or any network which you're part of and which works on these things, we would be very happy to become a part of that and contribute. And we would be very happy to keep these exchanges going on. And there was something that we were talking about just before the session started about the exchange of this kind of resources, knowledge resources. For example, Christian has written a book. He's also talking about the traffic power structure book, and Dr. Delham has written books on these issues. So we would be very happy in getting these and circulating among those who are interested in reading about these ideas. And thank you very much for everyone who joined. Akshita, Avikal, especially, thank you so much for doing the multiple tasks at the same time. And everyone, साथी लोग जो जुड़े हमारे साथ शहरी महिला कामगार यूनियन से, घरेलू कामगार यूनियन से, सब लोग का शुक्रिया. नीतू जी, सुनीता जी, अनीता जी, झारखंड से विश्वनाथ जी पूरे टाइम पे रहे, साथी का शुक्रिया, अर्जुन जी का शुक्रिया. So everyone, thanks. We will perhaps, Dr. Delham and Christian, do you have time? Do you want to stay for some time, 5 minutes or so, to discuss what we were talking about earlier? Or do you have to leave? Then we can perhaps talk over email.
Yes, I think I have to tend to my children. So I said that I had to, yeah. But we'll stay connected.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dr.
Thank
Delham.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
धन्यवाद.